There are lots of people who are reading the State Statistical Bureau data, but like who's out there talking to the factory managers? Like you can't just analyze a society and live a society through reading State Statistical Bureau data. You got to go there. And that was my entire brand. Hello, David and Chris. So happy to be here with you both. So one of the things that we do on Global Leadership is we try to have, we have our China in the News segment that we record, and we also have the Global Lens segment, which is about major leadership issues in the world. But we also really try to emphasize how important it is for us to have, in addition to high level knowledge about economics and high level knowledge about leadership and all of the literatures that are tied there, we also really try to be a boots on the ground group. And David, you and Chris will come at this from different angles. You are probably more similar to me because we both come out of academia. But boots on the ground for me means how important ethnography is and how important it is to be out talking to people. And so, when I was devastated by my time uh, when COVID hit, of not being able to be back in the country that I love for a couple of years, from about 2019 to 2023. In December of 2023, I went back to China for the first time in a couple of years, and our business partner, Sarah Kellogg, encouraged me to write a China journal entry and talk about my time, my boots on the ground time. And so we've been doing that. I've been back in China about 4 times a year, and our main business partners are uh, Chris Gao and Dashell Chen in China, and formerly Diane Long, who tragically passed away not too long ago. But we really want to just celebrate our boots on the ground experience. And so, David, I thank you in being the moderator of this. Normally, Christine Ying is our moderator for these topics, but she's very busy right now, and I thank you for sitting in. So, David, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. It's great. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Obviously, we have a long history, and in terms of on global leadership, helping you to found OGL. As a qualitative sociologist, someone who has approached the topic of creativity and innovation, particularly the leadership of creativity and innovation, as it happens on the ground. And so you're speaking about boots on the ground. These might be toe shoes. These may be creative leader shoes of different sorts. But what you've said very much resonates with me, and admire your and Chris's work on China, and very curious to hear about your most recent weeks in China, what you learned, and what's happening there. And maybe I can just take things and turn to you, Chris, and ask, picking up on what Doug has mentioned about boots on the ground in China, methodology and priority. How do you feel about that OGL approach, and how do you see your role as helping the world to understand China?
Yeah, I am a firm believer of OGL methodology. So we as human beings, we are emotional and intuitive. Getting boots on ground experience is what we differentiate ourselves, especially in a world of artificial intelligence. For my role, I have done quite a lot of researches with OGL team members, and I am passionate in our work. It is important, especially for now. I can feel it.
Great. Well, I think the timeliness that you underline is understandable. I think everywhere in the world, and understanding more about how that applies and helps to illuminate what's happening in China makes it even more important. Doug, beyond what you've already said about the methodology itself, how do you see your role as helping the world to understand China. Obviously, straddling the time you've spent in China for decades with obviously living, teaching, and working in the U.S. as well.
Well, thank you, David. And just to go back in time a little bit for our viewers, this was how I built my brand and how I built my knowledge. Going back to the time when I fell in love with the Chinese language and literature in 1988 at the University of Chicago, and then took a year away and spent time in Taiwan just studying language and literature. But my dissertation research was all about the idea of like, yeah, there are lots of people who are reading the State Statistical Bureau data, but like who's out there talking to the factory managers? And that was my entire brand was, if you sort of think about this, different approaches to things. There are the economists who just read State Statistical Bureau data and analyze data and are great econometricians and do lots of math. And then there are the anthropologists who are out there living in factories. And the field of economic sociology is much more kind of in the middle of those two things, right? And you're quite familiar with this from your own work, David, because what we try to do is, yeah, we want to be really analytical about the things that econometricians and people reading data are looking at, but we also want to be out talking to people. And we also want to be out in the field discussing things. And so that was how I did my work in the 1990s. And it's how I've continued to do my work ever since. Is I just believe in, knowing what we need to know about economics, but also being out there in the field and talking to people and getting the feeling about things. And so when I was out there with Apple from 2014 to 2019, it was a really important time for me. And then when I left Apple and founded OGL with you as my one of my founding partners, and then was suddenly excluded from China because of COVID, then I got on the phone and called Chris and Dashell and Diane and said, "Okay, guys, we need to be on the ground." And so they have become our China hands. And so since I've been able to be back, um, I come back to China 3 or 4 times a year and hang out with Chris and Dashell and just, spend time out in the field. And we had an amazing trip this last time. And so thank you for asking.
What were some of the highlights, Doug, of this most recent China trip?
Wow. So highlights, I mean, first of all, just getting to spend time with Chris and Dashell, just amazing. Like it just is an amazing thing to be out in the field, but also getting to spend time with leaders in the field, right? And so, Chris and I immediately got on a plane and took a trip to go talk to Justin Lin, who, in my opinion, is, not only does he advise President Xi or Chairman Xi, but he also is, in my opinion, one of the most important economists in the world right now. Certainly one of the most important economists in China, but in the world. And he sat down with us and he talked to us, and that was amazing. And then Chris and I went to Shenyang and just, met with several business leaders that were just amazing. I mean, Shenyang is this, we'll probably talk about this in a few minutes, but like Shenyang is this amazing city in Northeast China that nobody in the United States or probably in Europe, many places in Europe have heard of. And it's just fascinating the way this city is trying to build itself out as a global powerhouse. And then, spent, time in Shanghai, my beloved second home. It was an amazing trip.
That sounds terrific. I'm curious, Chris, what were your feelings about the Justin Lin interview?
Well, I would say that my feeling on Justin first is he is a scholar with grace and style. Justin is in a group that advises, as Doug mentioned, China's top leaders. Within the group, there are former director of China's central bank, former minister of industry and information, and former director of the National Bureau of Statistics. The topic we discussed most with Justin is on China's consumption. Actually, he brought this topic by himself. And I'm really glad that we are thinking in the same directions.
Thank you. I have to follow up. It's a bit of a teaser. What did he have to say about Chinese consumption? Were there projections? Were there forecasts? Were there surprises that he revealed to both of you?
Well, I would say that yes, he is uh, concerned on the methodology, how to explain China's consumption and how to explain the real situation of consumption in China to the world. This actually leads me to give make some recommendation for Doug for his future visits in Shanghai. We will come to this later.
Okay. Future visits and future consumption.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to Shanghai. Although first, I want to go back to something that you mentioned, Doug, which is Shenyang. And you're right. I think for many of us, we may have seen it on a map, but we know very little about Shenyang. Could we talk a little about it? What were your observations about that part of the trip?
Well, thank you, David. And it was just, I mean, I've spent a little bit of time in Shenyang in the past, but this particular trip was amazing to me. And so just for our audience, just to chart this out, you know, Shenyang is the capital city of Liaoning province, right? And so it's a province in the northeastern China. And if people have heard about Liaoning, they probably heard about the city of Dalian, which is on the east coast, right next to the East China Sea and right across from Japan. And it's a major import export city. But they maybe haven't heard about Shenyang. But Shenyang is the capital of Liaoning, and it's a major industrial capital that's really strategizing in important ways to build the new industrial landscape, right? So, as Chris and I were there, we went out and saw the old GM plant, which is shutting down, but that we also saw the BMW plant, which Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you told me that BMW has invested over a trillion yuan in
Mm-hmm.
in the city of Shenyang over the last, decade. That's an amazing number, right? Like I don't know what number that is, but it's about 2 to 300 billion dollars in the city of Shenyang. And so, yes, and there's a number of other companies besides the BMW factory and plant, but also, the Shenyang Machine Tools Factory, which Chris and I have done research on. And then, beyond just the economics of all of those industrial landscapes, Chris and I were staying in the middle of Shenyang, and Shenyang is a city that's really trying to build itself out as an industrial player. So Chris and I went to a party on the roof of a hotel in which there were a number of bands and there were, just people playing music, trying to think about like how great Shenyang is. And then later, he and I, a couple days later, we went to a city level industrial occupation idea, and there were a bunch of 9-year-olds on the stage singing about how great Shenyang was. It was just a beautiful story. Like it was so fun, right, Chris? Am I getting all that right? I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Shenyang is the hub of China's heavy industry and automobile industry. To me, actually, there's a sentimental moment in the trip. Remember when on Saturday we went to General Motors factory in Dadong district? The site is now abandoned, right? It is a huge factory. We walked around the factory for over 20 minutes. Actually, I used to have a Chevy SUV made at this factory. My colleague, the show, had a GM8 also made in this factory. But sadly now, Chevrolet will probably be bought out of China pretty soon. So looking at this abandoned factory, I was filled with, how to say, mixed feelings as a time. I wanted to tell General Motors, don't lie flat, don't give up.
That's beautiful, Chris. David, back to you.
I'd heard I heard, Chris, that you also gave Doug and his student an ethnographic assignment on consumer behavior. We're back to consumption. What were you hoping that they would observe?
Well, it's one is on consumption, follow Justin Ling's visit. The second is I want Doug to see this Nanjing Road. It is China's most famous shopping street. The Nanjing, it is Nanjing West Road and Nanjing East Road. Especially, I would say, is the Nanjing West Road is considered as China's Fifth Avenue. Doug has been there many times, but it's Micaiah's first visit. I wanted to see what they would find out with this combination.
So, Doug, that takes us to you. What, given what Chris wanted you and your student to
Yeah.
see, what was your experience? What did you discover?
Well, so thank you, David, and Chris, thank you for the assignment. It was again a OGL boots on the ground ethnographic assignment, right? Like we really need to go out and see like what are people seeing? What are we doing? What are we talking about? And this was McKay's first time in China, and he's just a fabulous student and an amazing person. And he's lived abroad before. He was a missionary in the Philippines for a couple of years and been in a number of different places, but this is his first time in China, and he has real aspirations for developing a China portfolio. And so it was great because, I mean, Chris's ethnographic experience was amazing, or ethnographic assignment was amazing because, you know, you probably remember this, David. You know, my first time in China was in 1994, right? And so this is long before the pedestrian road on Nanjing East Road was built, right? And so it was so fun to just kind of be out and about. And we were staying in a hotel relatively near there. But Chris's assignment was go out and take Micaiah and see what are people doing? You know, what does the Nike store look like? What does, you know, the Adidas store look like? What does the Apple store look like? What does the Huawei store look like? What does the Bund look like? You know, it was just like, and just sort of seeing that and seeing the way people were engaging in consumer behavior was amazing, right? And so there was just that sort of ethnographic experience of it. But the second day, so Chris gave us two assignments. Walk down Nanjing East Road to the Bund, but also walk back to Jing'an to the Jing'an Temple. And David, this was amazing to me because when I was, you know, a young graduate student in 1994 in China, the heart of China was something called the Portman. So the Portman was the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and it was the big area, and it's where I met our beloved dear friend Diane Long. But it's also very near something called the Jing'an Temple, and so I hadn't been back there in many, many years, and so I walked Micaiah back there. So we had the intense consumer experience on Nanjing East Road on day one of Chris's assignment. On day two, we walked back to the Jing'an Temple the other direction. And man, David, it brought back such big memories. But the one funny kind of memory that like brought everything of my worlds together, the newest, most famous big Apple store is right across from the Jing'an Temple. And so like you walk down into this beautiful space, and then, you know, it was so funny to listen to McCabe. Like McCabe was like, wow, that Tim Cook is a genius because you walk out of this space and you look up at the Jing'an Temple and you sort of think you're in heaven on earth, you know, buying Apple products. And so it was just so fun to see it through his eyes, and it was amazing. And so Chris, thank you for the ethnographic assignment of going out and seeing consumer behavior in China after all of these years. It was amazing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Actually, I spent quite a lot of money buying my wife a Apple 16 in this store.
Good.
Experience at a different temple.
Yeah.
Uh, Doug, I'm just curious. What you mentioned, of course, with Makea is uh, I'm sure something that you experience regularly. That is, after 3 decades, you've spent so much time in China. You're with Makea, who is there for the first time, and I'm sure he's benefiting from your extraordinary experience, but you're also, as you just described, benefiting from his fresh eyes. And so I'm wondering, how was it having him with you in China on this trip?
So David, thank you for that question. And it was amazing, and it was so breathtaking because, I mean, McKay is about the age I was when I first lived in Shanghai in the 1990s. Uh, and it was so breathtaking to see it through his eyes. I was just like, I was sort of like living back in that space. And so again, it's one of the things that we talk about at OGL a lot. And we mentioned in the beginning of this call, like, our boots on the ground experience. It's really important. Like, you can't just analyze a society and live a society through reading state statistical bureau data. You got to go there. And so I've grown up living China through my own eyes, and then having friends like Chris and Diana and Deshelle. But then to see it through, a young man who was, my age when I first came to China, and just see how breathtaking it was for me. It was a gift. I really enjoyed it. And being able to travel with Mikhail he got funding from Arizona State University and Thunderbird to come over for the trip, and he was just sort of my research assistant there, and it was a gift. I loved it. Thank you.
Extraordinary. I don't want to push the metaphor too far, but it makes me think of the value of both older, broken in boots on the ground, as well as new ones that find new paths. Um, I want to shift to another city. Doug, you had another meeting in Beijing. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was also a gift, David. I mean, there was so through Thunderbird, um, as you know, over the last year, we've developed an intense presence of Thunderbird in terms of thinking about U.S.-China relations. This started about April 30th, 2024, because Global Ties Arizona had a major event, and I was invited to be a speaker at that event, and I made some broad claims that were about how important this is as a moment for U.S.-China relations. And Phoenix is a really important place in U.S.-China relations right now, not just because it's the fifth largest city in America and the fastest growing city in America, but because TSMC is building a manufacturing supply chain in the semiconductor fabrication industry. And right after that talk, I was approached by an individual named John Lee, who is the president of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Arizona. And he's become a friend, and we have developed a lot of programmatic work together over the last year, and just we've done a lot. His wife happens to be, she just retired, but she happens to be a very well-known person in the reporting industry. Um, and so she just knows a lot of people that are a part of major Chinese reporting industry work. And so at one point, when John understood that I was in China, he said, "Can you and maybe you and your student come back to Beijing and we can host you for a dinner?" And so I didn't know what it was about, but suddenly, David, I'm at a dinner with 15 of probably the most important Chinese industry reporters, people like the People's Daily and, a number of other publications. And they were all just sitting around a table talking to Doug Guthrie and Mackay Gorham. And so it was just a gift. I didn't realize that was going to happen. I didn't strategize for it to happen, but it did. And that's just one of the things that happens when you're a boots on the ground person. You just get get invited to some interesting dinners sometimes. So it was amazing. Thank you for asking.
It sounds amazing. Obviously, there's that serendipity. you talked previously about Shenyang and Justin Lin. You responded very favorably to Chris's ethnographic assignment, and on top of all that, you were also teaching a course on this trip, innovative leadership in China. Could you share some thoughts about that? How did you feel about the course?
So I would love to share a few thoughts, but I also was gifted with the fact that Chris, as my OGL partner, sat in on the course. And so before I talk about the course, Chris, maybe we'll go over to you. Like, what were your thoughts on the course?
Well, David and Doug, I think that the course is great from its content as innovation and leadership, and also performance of the students in class are awesome. And I also told Doug that I like him better as a teacher in the classroom than in his YouTube broadcast.
So, David, if I could jump into
Um,
that, and
I would take that as positive feedback, Doug.
I love positive feedback, but I also love that Chris is unencumbered with being nervous about telling me anything. And he's like, he said to me after my first day of teaching when he was watching me, he's like, Doug, I actually like you better as a teacher than I do watching you on YouTube. So, and I was like, okay, okay. So I just took it as positive feedback and good feedback. But to your question, David, you know, this is the first time that we've done this open enrollment class on innovative leadership in China. And it was it was a great experience, but it was also an interestingly mixed experience in the sense that um, we had a lot of students. We had 18 students in the class. 16 of them were from one company, a company called Ecolab, which is, a publicly traded company that thinks in depth about, you know, innovative approaches to pharmaceutical production. Um, and, it was interesting because I was thinking like, well, innovative leadership, everybody will want to hear about the most innovative company in the world, Apple. Let me use my case study as Apple. And it turned out after the first morning session, David, I got a lot of feedback saying like, Apple schmapple. We don't care. Like we don't work for Apple. Who cares? And so the way we teach in, as you know, in business school world, we often use cases and these students were like giving feedback to my TA and to my student and to Chris about like, we do not care about Apple. Like, can you talk to us about Ecolab? And so we had to pivot a little bit, but it was really amazing because these students were serious. They were very serious about learning about one, innovation, two, creativity, three, innovative leadership. And they didn't care about Apple and Tim Cook and Steve Jobs. What they cared about is what these core concepts mean for their company, Ecolab. And so with Chris's help, I was able to pivot a little bit and I think we drove it home. And so I don't know, Chris, my sense is that people walked away happy. I don't know, what was your sense?
Yeah, I feel the same.
Great. Chris, any other thoughts on the content of the course, particularly as Doug has described it in terms of innovation, the interest by the participants in really focusing on kind of their own innovation and leadership challenges in China?
Well, they are the middle level, I would say the managers of the company. And they actually, what I see that they learn from this course is leadership is not about like creating new things, right? In special products for them. It can be like a process and in the work. And also, I would say that they have been given a tool that they can use in their work. I think this is great.
Terrific. Well, I think that we're going to need to bring this to a close. Although it sounds as if this most recent trip was very rich, and we could continue. But maybe, Chris, I could stick with you. Any final thoughts on the OGL boots on the ground trip, the most recent one? And maybe any thoughts on the OGL pieces you are working on right now? And I'm guessing those may be connected in terms of writings
Yeah,
that are going to emerge or be informed by the most recent trip.
yeah. David, thanks for asking. So before I explain my recent pieces, I would tell a story about that happened in our trip. So when we greeted each other with Justin Lin, he turned to Doug and said, "Doug, why you are wearing so many clothes?" Later on, Doug told me that he was somewhat embarrassed at that moment. But now, Doug, I want to tell you that this is your style, and just wear it. If in medias, Jason Huang always wear his thick leather clothes, a leather jacket in the summertime in Beijing, why not you keep wearing your ionic vest? And yeah, that's it. That's it. Yes. And the piece, the series I'm working on is a series of articles on the consumptions in China. Because now it is the hottest season in the North Hemisphere. So the first piece is about air conditioning. I know that David, that Paris used to 2 weeks ago, right? It's very hot, 40 degrees. So I don't know if your room has air conditioning or not. So my relative in Paris, I don't think they have. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I look forward to that. And yes, fortunately, I'm one of those ugly Americans who has air conditioning. Although there are many here who look away because they think that it's inappropriate. But I look forward to that piece because I think obviously for China, for Europe, and for the world, that's such an important topic this summer and moving forward. Doug, can I actually ask you the same? Any final thoughts
Yeah.
about the trip that you'd like to share?
So I have a couple of things, David, and thank you. Thank you for hosting us and asking us great questions. The first thing I want to say is I just want our readership and viewership to know it is truly a gift for me to work with Chris and Deshelle and formerly Diane Long. Um, this, I like to think of myself as a China scholar that's doing big ideas and thinking about things, but this stuff does not get done without Deshelle and Chris. I mean, Chris is so much the engine of what OGL is doing intellectually. And so when Chris talks sort of humbly about his new piece on consumption and that we're this stuff happens because of Chris and Deshelle. And so I just want to thank you, Chris, and thank you, David, for asking because, you know, we're trying to teach the world about what's going on in China today. And Chris and I were in a room with, in my opinion, the most important economist in China and one of the most important economists in the world. And this wasn't just a high level meeting in which he was just, talking superficially about things. He was like, am I right, Chris? Like he got very quickly into the conversation and said, like, what I want you guys to be thinking about is consumption. The big thing in the new institutional economics, which is his theory, and it's a major important theory that's sort of the groundbreaking interstitial space between neoclassical economic theory and Keynesian style economics. This is Justin Lin's theory. And here's this guy who advises President Xi, and he's saying, I want you guys to look into consumption. Can you do that for me? And so it was a major gift. And I was just like, okay. And so I just want to emphasize, like, I don't do this stuff without Chris and Deshelle. And so it's an amazing thing. The second thing that's really to your question, David, I really believe in this on boots on the ground stuff, right? Like, part of it was meeting with Justin Lin and then the reporters in Beijing, but part of it was also the meetings that Chris and I had in Shenyang, right? And watching the 9-year-old kids performing on a stage about, attracting foreign investment to, I mean, it was just, these are the things that you can't reproduce for students. Like this is just like we want people to get out into the field. And so it was a gift for me. And the final thanks that I want to just raise is to you, David. Um, you and I have been partners. When I was describing somebody to you to, to recently about you and my relationship with you, you and I go back 30 years. Like we go back to 1997 at NYU. And you've been my friend and partner both at NYU, but then with Guthrie and Associates and the Berlin School of Creative Leadership and then OGL. And I want to thank you for being a part of this team and for doing our interview today. It means the world to me.
Well, it's very, very, very kind of you, and grateful that you and Chris welcomed me. And as someone who does not have expertise in China, I've learned a lot. And it seems to me, if I might add my own perhaps obvious thought about the OGL boots on the ground approach, it is boots on the ground. It's about being physically there and having the sorts of very rich and illuminating experiences that both of you have shared. Uh, but those experiences generate ideas. They yield insights, and from those ideas and insights grow actions. And those actions are part of what, in fact, keeps the world moving. And in the world today, that means increasing understanding and exchange. Between China, the US, Europe, all of us. So I think that it's enormously important work. And again, it starts by having those boots on the grounds and having the sorts of experiences that you've related here. So thanks for letting me sit in. It's been a great pleasure, and appreciate all the viewers here joining us as well.
And David, if I
Thank
could
you,
just
David.
have the final last word, you may not have the same China experience that we have, but you and I have grown up in the field of creative leadership and leadership more generally. And you are an expert in the field of leadership and creativity and innovation. And, this is part of what OGL's brand is too. And so I just want to thank you for being a part of this and being a part of our team. Thank you.